Let me start with something uncomfortable. What we're seeing right now in the financial world is not normal. And I don't mean a little unusual or slightly different. I mean structurally, fundamentally different from what most people have been taught to expect. For years, the playbook felt simple. Work hard, save consistently, invest slowly, and over time, things would make sense. Markets would rise, fall, and recover in a somewhat predictable rhythm. But today, that rhythm feels broken. Prices are rising faster than people's incomes. Assets that once felt out of reach are becoming even more distant. And the gap between those who understand money and those who don't is widening rapidly. Now, here's the part most people miss. When things feel confusing, unstable, even a little scary, that's usually a signal. Not to panic, but to pay attention. Because moments like these don't just create risk, they create asymmetrical opportunity. Think about it. When everything is obvious and comfortable, there's very little advantage to be gained. Everyone is doing the same thing. Everyone is following the same advice. And as a result, outcomes are average. But when uncertainty enters the system, behavior changes. Some people freeze, some people pull back completely. Some people make emotional, reactive decisions. And then there's a much smaller group of people who lean in, not recklessly, but deliberately. They ask better questions. They seek to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface instead of reacting to headlines or noise. That's where the opportunity lives. Right now, we're seeing shifts in how money flows through the system. The cost of borrowing is changing. The value of cash is changing. The way assets are priced is changing. And when these foundations shift, the rules of the game shift with them. But most people are still playing by the old rules. They're waiting for things to go back to normal. They're assuming this is temporary. They're hoping that if they just stay patient, everything will correct itself. And maybe some things will, but the bigger picture is this. Transitions like this are rarely temporary. They redefine the environment. So the real question isn't when will things go back? The real question is, how do I adapt before everyone else does? Because timing matters. Not in the sense of perfectly predicting the market, but in recognizing when the environment has changed and adjusting your behavior accordingly. And right now, whether people realize it or not, we are in one of those moments. It doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel clear. But that's exactly why it matters. Because the biggest financial shifts don't happen when everyone is ready. They happen when almost no one is. We are living through a rare moment in financial history, and it's easy to underestimate just how significant it is while you're in the middle of it. Because on the surface, life still looks normal. People go to work, salaries come in, bills get paid, markets move up and down like they always have. But underneath that surface, something much deeper is shifting. The systems that have supported financial growth for decades are being tested. The cost of money, something most people never think about, is no longer cheap or predictable. Borrowing is more expensive. Saving doesn't feel as rewarding as it should. And the balance between risk and reward has started to feel off. This creates a kind of tension. On one side, people are being told to stay the course, to keep investing, to trust the long-term process. On the other side, their real-life experience is telling them something different. Groceries cost more. Housing feels further away. Financial progress feels slower, even when they're doing everything right. That disconnect is important because it signals that we're not just going through a typical cycle, we're going through a transition. And transitions are uncomfortable by nature. They blur the lines between what used to work and what will work next. They make it harder to rely on old assumptions. They force you to think more critically about your decisions instead of operating on autopilot. This is what I mean by a financial turning point. Not a single event, not one headline, but a gradual shift in how the entire system behaves. During these moments, patterns break. Assets that used to move together start behaving differently. Strategies that felt safe suddenly carry more risk. And opportunities begin to appear in places most people aren't even looking. But here's where psychology comes in. Most people don't respond well to uncertainty. When things feel unclear, the natural instinct is to either do nothing or to react emotionally, to pull money out of investments at the worst time, to avoid making decisions altogether, or to chase whatever seems safe in the moment without fully understanding it. And that's exactly why outcomes diverge so dramatically during periods like this. Because while the majority are reacting, a smaller group is observing. They're not rushing. They're not guessing. They're stepping back and asking, what's actually changing here? They understand that every financial environment rewards a different kind of behavior. There are times when growth is easy and momentum does most of the work for you. And then there are times like this, where discipline, patience, and positioning matter far more than speed. This is one of those times, and it requires a different mindset. It requires you to accept that things may not feel smooth for a while, That progress might look slower on the surface. That clarity might come later than you'd like. But it also requires you to recognize that these are the exact conditions where long-term advantages are built. Because when the environment resets, so do the starting points. And the people who take the time to understand the shift, rather than resist it, are the ones who quietly put themselves in a completely different position for what comes next. Here's where most people go wrong, and it's subtle, but it makes all the difference. They spend their time trying to predict what's going to happen next. They watch the news, follow market updates, listen to opinions, and try to piece together a perfect picture of the future. They want certainty before they act. They want confirmation that they're making the right move. But the truth is, by the time something feels certain, the opportunity is usually gone. Because markets don't reward certainty. They reward positioning. And positioning is not about being right. It's about being ready. So instead of asking, what's going to happen next? A better question is, how do I make sure I'm in a strong position no matter what happens? That shift in thinking changes everything. It moves you away from reacting to short-term noise and toward building a structure that can handle uncertainty. Because uncertainty isn't a temporary phase, it's a constant feature of the financial world. So what does that actually look like in practice? First, it means diversifying where your money comes from. Relying on a single income stream in an unpredictable environment is risky. It doesn't matter how stable it feels today. Things can change quickly. Building additional streams, even small ones at first, creates resilience. It gives you options. And in uncertain times, options are incredibly valuable. Second, it means investing consistently rather than emotionally. When markets fluctuate, emotions tend to take over. Fear when prices drop, excitement when they rise. And both of those emotions can lead to poor decisions, either pulling out too early or jumping in too late. Consistency removes that problem. It allows you to participate in the market without needing perfect timing. It turns volatility from something you fear into something you can quietly benefit from over time. Third, it means increasing your financial awareness, not in a complicated, overwhelming way, but in a practical, everyday sense. Understanding where your money is going, knowing what you're invested in and why, being able to separate real information from noise. Because the more clarity you have, the less likely you are to make reactive decisions. And finally, it means maintaining flexibility. This is the part most people overlook. In times of uncertainty, opportunities don't announce themselves in advance. They appear suddenly, often when sentiment is negative and confidence is low. And the people who can take advantage of them are the ones who have kept some level of liquidity, some level of adaptability. They're not fully locked in. They're not overextended. They have room to move when something shifts. Because when assets become undervalued, when new opportunities emerge, when the environment changes direction, the ability to act quickly matters, not impulsively, but decisively. And that only happens when you've prepared for it ahead of time. So this isn't about having a perfect plan. It's about building a position that can absorb shocks, adapt to change, and take advantage of opportunities when they arise. Because in the end, the goal isn't to outguess the market. It's to make sure that whatever the market does next, you're in a position where it can work in your favor. Let me be direct with you, because this is where everything comes together. Moments like this don't come around often. Not the kind where the rules are shifting, where uncertainty is high, and where the gap between those who act and those who hesitate starts to widen in a very real way. Most of the time, financial progress is slow, predictable, incremental. You save a bit, invest a bit, and over years, maybe decades, you see the results. But every so often, there are periods where that timeline compresses, where a few well-positioned decisions can change your trajectory far more than years of routine effort. And the reason most people miss those moments isn't because they lack intelligence or resources. It's because they hesitate. They wait for more clarity. They wait for reassurance. They wait for things to feel safe again. But here's the reality. By the time things feel safe, the window has already started to close. Because opportunity rarely feels comfortable. It often shows up disguised as uncertainty, doubt, or even fear. It doesn't come with guarantees. It doesn't come with perfect timing. And it definitely doesn't come when everyone agrees it's a good idea. That's why the decision you make during periods like this matters so much. Not a single dramatic decision, but a series of small, intentional ones. Choosing to learn instead of ignore. Choosing to act instead of delay. Choosing to stay consistent instead of reactive. These choices don't feel significant in the moment. They're quiet. They're often invisible to everyone else. But over time, they compound, and that's what creates separation. 5 years from now, people will look back at this period very differently. Some will say, things were too uncertain. I didn't know what to do, so I stayed where I was. And their situation will likely look very similar, just with more time passed. Others will say, that's when I started paying attention. That's when I adjusted how I approached money. That's when I made decisions that didn't feel easy, but made sense. And their trajectory will reflect that. Same environment, same conditions, completely different outcomes. So the question isn't whether this moment matters. It does. The question is how you respond to it. Because no one is going to come and tell you, this is your moment. Act now. There's no announcement, no clear starting line, no perfect signal. It's subtle. It shows up in shifts you can feel but can't fully explain yet. In changes that seem small individually but significant when you step back and connect them. And by the time those signals become obvious to everyone, the advantage is already gone. So this is really about perspective. Do you see uncertainty as something to avoid or something to prepare for? Do you wait until everything makes sense, or do you start building while things are still unclear? Because this window, however long it lasts, will pass. And when it does, it won't be about what the market did. It will be about what you did during the time you had.